There are always men who cry, "A woman's place is in the home. She shouldn't be doing a man's job." And time again, they are proven so wrong. Delilah and the Space Rigger by Robert Heinlein. Read by Karl Wallace. Sure, we had trouble building Space Station 1, but the trouble was people. Not that building a station 22,300 miles out in space is a breeze. It was an engineering feat bigger than the Panama Canal or the pyramids, or even the Susquehanna power pile. But Tiny Larson built her, and the job Tiny tackles gets built. I first saw Tiny playing guard on a semi-pro team, working his way through Oppenheimer Tech. He worked summers for me, therefore, until he graduated. He stayed in construction, and ultimately I went to work for him. Tiny wouldn't touch a job unless he was satisfied with engineering. The station had jobs designed to it that called for six-armed monkeys instead of grown men in spacesuits. Tiny spotted such boners. Not a ton of material went into the sky until the specs and drawings suited him. But it was people that gave us the headache. We had a sprinkling of married men, but the rest were wild kids, attracted by high pay and adventure. Some were busted spacemen. Some were specialists, like electricians and instrument men. About half were deep sea divers, used to working in pressure suits. There were sandhogs and riggers and welders and shop fitters and 2 circus acrobats. We fired 4 of them from being drunk on the job. Tiny had to break one stiff's arm before he would stay fired. What worried us was, where did they get it? Turned out the ship fitter had rigged a heatless still using the vacuum around us. He was making vodka from potatoes swiped from the commissary. Hate to let him go, but he was too smart. Since we were flying free in a 24-hour circular orbit, with everything weightless and floating, you'd think that shooting traps was impossible. But a radio man named Peters figured a dodge to substitute steel dice in a magnetic field. He also eliminated the element of chance, so we fired him. We planned to ship him back in the next supply ship, the RS Half Moon. I was in Tiny's office when she blasted to match our orbit. Tiny swam to the viewport. "Send for Peters, Dad," he said, and give him the old heave-ho. "Who's his relief?" "Party named G. Brooks McNigh," I told him. A line came snaking over from the ship. Tiny said, "I don't believe she's matched." He buzzed the Radio Shack for the ship's relative motion to the station. The answer didn't please him, and he told them to call the Half Moon. Tiny waited until the TV screen showed the rocket ship CEO. "Good morning, Captain. Why did you place the line on us?" "For cargo, naturally. Get your hot pads over here. I want to blast off before we even enter the shadow." The station spends about an hour and a half each day passing through Earth's shadow. We worked 2 11-hour shifts and skipped the dark period to avoid rigging lights and heating suits. Tiny shook his head. "Not until you have matched course and speed with us." "I am matched." "Not to specification, by my instruments." "Have a heart, Tiny. I'm short on maneuvering fuel. If I juggle this entire shift to make a course correction on a few lousy tons of cargo, I'll be so late I'll have to put down another secondary field. I may even have to make a dead stick landing. In those days, all ships had landing wings." "Look, Captain," Tiny said sharply, "the only purpose of your lift was to match orbits for those same few lousy tons. I don't care if you landed on Little America on a pogo stick. The first load here was placed for living here in the proper orbit, and I'm making every other load match. Get that covered wagon into the groove." "Very well, Superintendent," Captain Shields said stiffly. "Don't be sore, Don," Tiny said softly. "By the way, you've got a passenger for me?" "Oh, yes, so I have." Shields' face broke out in a grin. "We'll keep him aboard until we unload. We can beat the shadow yet." Fine. After all, why should I add to your troubles?" The skipper switched off, leaving our boss looking puzzled. We didn't have time to wonder at his words. Shield whipped his ship around on gyros, blasted her second through, and put her dead in space with us pronto, and used very little fuel, despite his belly aching. I grabbed every man we could spare, and managed to get the cargo clear before we swung into Earth's shadow. Weightlessness is an unbelievable advantage in handling freight. We gutted the Half Moon, by hand, mind you, in 54 minutes. The stuff was oxygen tanks, loaded, and aluminum mirrors to shield them, panels of outer skin, sandwich stuff with titanium alloy sheets with foamed glass filling, and cases of JATO units to spin the living quarters. Once it was all out and snapped to our old cargo line, we set the men back for the same line. I won't let a man work outside without a line, no matter how space happy he figures he is. And they told Shield to send over the passenger and cast off. This little guy came out the ship's airlock and hooked on the ship's line. Handling stuff like he was used to space, he set his feet and dived straight on the stretch line, his snap hook running free. I hurried back and motioned him to follow me. Tiny, the new man, and I reached the airlock together. Besides the usual cargo lock, we had 3 GE quick locks. Quick lock is an Iron Man without spikes. Fits a man in a suit, leaving just a few pints of air to scavenge, and cycles automatically. Big time saver in changing shifts. I passed to the middle-sized one. Tiny, of course, used the big one. Without hesitation, the new man pulled himself into the small one. We went into Tiny's office. Tiny strapped down and pushed his helmet back. "Well, McKnight," he said, glad to have it with us." The new radio tech opened his helmet. I heard a low, pleasant voice answered, "Thank you." I stared and didn't say anything. From where I was, I could see that the radio tech was wearing a hair ribbon. I thought Tiny would explode. He didn't need to see the ribbon. With the helmet up, it was clear the new man was as female as Venus de Milo. Tiny sputtered and he was unstrapped and diving for the viewport. "Dad," he yelled, "get the Radio Shack. Stop that ship." But the half moon was already a ball of fire in the distance. Tiny looked dazed. "Who else knows about this?" "Nobody, so far as I know." He thought a bit. "We got to keep her out of sight." "That's it. We keep her locked up and out of sight until the next ship matches in." He didn't look at her. "What in the world are you talking about?" McKnight's voice was higher and no longer pleasant. Tiny glared. "You, that's what. Or are you a stowaway?" "Don't be silly. I'm G.B. McKnight, electronics engineer. Don't you have my papers?" Tiny turned to me. "Dad, this is your fault. Pardon me, miss. How did you let them send you a woman? Didn't you even read the events report on her?" "Me," I said. "Now let's see here, you big squarehead. Those forms don't show sex. The Fair Employment Commission won't allow you except it was pertinent to the job. You tell me it's not pertinent to the job here?" "Not by job classifications, it ain't. There's lots of female radio and radar men, but back Earthside." "This isn't Earthside." He had something. He's thinking of those 2-legged wolves swarming over the job outside. And G.B. McKnight was pretty. It'd be 8 months with no woman at all affecting my judgment, but she would pass. "I've even heard of female rocket pilots," I added for spite. "I don't care if you've heard of female archangels. I'll have no women here." "Just a minute." If I was riled, he was plain sore. "You are the construction superintendent, are you not?" "Yes," Tiny admitted. "Well then, how do you know what sex I am?" "Are you trying to deny that you're a woman?" "Hardly. I'm proud of it. But officially, you don't know what sex G. Brooks McKnight is. That's why I use G instead of Gloria. I don't ask questions, don't ask favors." Tiny grunted. "You won't get any. Don't know how you sneaked in, but get this, McKnight or Gloria or whatever, you're fired. You go back on the next ship. Meanwhile, we'll have to keep the man from knowing we've got a woman aboard." I could see her count 10. "May I speak?" she said finally. "Or does your Captain Bligh act extend to that too?" "Say or say." "I didn't sneak in. I'm on the permanent staff of the station, chief communications engineer. I took this vacancy myself to get to know the equipment while it was being installed. I'll live here eventually, and I see no reason not to start now." Tiny waved it away. "There'll be men and women both here someday, even kids. Right now it's stag, and it'll stay that way." "We'll see. Anyhow, you can't fire me. Radio personnel don't work for you." She had a point. Communications and other specialists were linked to the contractors. Tiny snorted. "Maybe I can't fire you if I can send you home. Requisition personnel must be satisfied to the contractor," meaning me. Paragraph 7, Clause M. I wrote that clause myself. "Do you know if requisition personnel are refused without cause, the contractor bears the replacement cost? I'll risk paying your fare home, but I won't have you here." "You are most unreasonable." "Perhaps, but else I was good for the job. I'd rather have a dope putter than have a woman sniffing around my boys. She gasped. Tiny knew he'd said too much. He added, "Sorry, miss, but that's it. You stay undercover until I can get rid of you." Before she could speak, I cut in, "Tiny, look behind you." Staring in the port was one of the riggers. His eyes bugged out. 3 or 4 more floated up and joined him. Then Tiny zoomed up to the port and they scattered like minnows. He scared them almost out of their suits. I thought he was going to shove his fists through the quartz. He came back looking whipped. "Miss," he said, pointing, "wait in my room." When he was gone, he added, "What do we do?" I said, "I thought you made your mind up, Tiny." "I have," he answered peevishly. "Ask the chief inspector to come in, will you?" That showed how far he was gone. The inspection gang belonged to Harriman Enterprises, not to us, and Tiny rated them mere nuisances. Besides, Tiny was an upper Harvard graduate. Dalrymple was from MIT. He came in brash and cheerful. "Good morning, Superintendent." "Morning, Mr. Witherspoon. What can I do for you?" Glumly, Tiny told the story. Dalrymple looked smug. "She's right, old man. You can send her back and even specify a male relief. But I can hardly endorse for a proper cause, can I?" "Damnation, Dalrymple, we can't have a woman around here." "A moot point. Not covered by contract, you know. If your office hadn't sent us a crooked gamble as a predecessor, I wouldn't be in this jam." There. Remember the old blood pressure. Suppose I'll leave the endorsement open and arbitrate the cost. That's fair, eh?" "I suppose so. Thanks." "Not at all. But consider this. When you rushed Peters off before interviewing the newcomer, you cut yourself down to one operator. Hammond can't stand watch 24 hours a day. You can sleep in the shack. The alarm will wake him. I can't accept that. The home office and shift frequencies must be guarded at all times. Harriman Enterprises has supplied a qualified operator. Afraid you must use her for the time being. Tiny will always cooperate with the inevitable," he said quietly. "She'll take first shift. Better put the married man on that shift." And he called her in. "Go to the radio shack and start making it early so that Hammond can go off watch soon. Mind what he tells you, if he's a good man." "I know," she said briskly. "I trained him." Tiny bit his lip. C.I. said, "Superintendent doesn't bother with trivia. I'm Robert Dalrymple, Chief Inspector." He probably didn't introduce his assistant either. "Mr. Witherspoon." "Call me Dad," I said. She smiled and said, "Howdy, Dad." I felt warm clear through. She went on to Dalrymple. "Odd we haven't met before." Tiny butted in. "McNye, you sleep in my room." She raised her eyebrows. He went on angrily. "Oh, I'll get my stuff out at once. And get this. Keep the door locked off shift." "You're darn tootin' I will." Tiny blushed. I was too busy to see much of Miss Gloria. It was cargo to stow, the new tanks to install and shield. That left the most worrisome task of all, putting spin on the living quarters. Even the optimists didn't expect much interplanetary traffic for some years. Nevertheless, Harriman Enterprises wanted to get some activities moved in and paying rent against their enormous investment. IT&T had leased space for a microwave relay station, several million a year for television alone. The Royal Borough was itching to set up a hemispheric integrating station. Palomar Observatory had a concession. The Security Council had some hush-hush project. Fermi Physical Labs and Caring Institute each had space. A dozen tenants wanted to move in now or sooner, even if we never completed accommodations for tourists and travelers. There were time bonuses in it for 5 companies incorporated, and their help. So we were in a hurry to get spin on the quarters. People who've never been out have trouble getting to their heads. At least I had. There's no feeling of weight, no up or down in a free orbit in space. There's Earth, round and beautiful, only 20,000 miles away, close enough to brush your sleeve. You know it's pulling you toward it. Yet you feel no weight. Absolutely none. You float. Floating is fine for some types of work. When it's time to eat or play cards or bathe, it's good to feel weight on your feet. Your dinner stays quiet and you feel more natural. You've seen pictures of the station, a huge cylinder like a bass drum, with ship's nose pockets dimpling its size. Imagine a snare drum spinning around inside the bass drum. That's the living quarters with centrifugal force pinching for gravity. We could have spun the whole station, but you can't brush the ship against a whirling dervish. So we built a spinning part for creature comfort and an outer stationary part for docking, tanks, storerooms, and the like. We passed from one to the other at the hub. When Miss Gloria joined us at the inner part was closed and pressurized, while the rest was a skeleton of girders. Mighty pretty, though. Great network of shiny struts and ties against black sky and stars. Titanium alloy 1403, light, strong, and non-corrodable. The station is flimsy compared with a ship, since it doesn't have to take blast-off stresses. That means we didn't dare put on spin bivalent means, which is where JATO units come in. JATO, Jet Assisted Takeoff. Rocket units invented to give airplanes a boost. Now we use them whenever a controlled push is needed, say to get a truck out of the mud on a dam job. We mounted 4,000 of them around the frame of the living quarters, each one placed just so. They were wired up and ready to fire when Tiny came to me looking worried. The ID said, "Let's drop everything and finish compartment D113. Okay, I said. D113 was in the non-spin part. Rig an airlock and stock with 2 weeks supplies. That'll change your mass distribution for spin, I suggested. I'll refigure it next arc period. Then we'll shift JATOs. When Dalrymple heard about it, it came charging around. It made a delay in making rental space available. What's the idea? Tiny stared at him. They've been cooler than ordinary lately. Dalrymple would find excuses to seek out Miss Gloria. Had to pass through Tiny's office to reach her temporary room, and Tiny had funny told him to get out and stay out. The idea, Tiny said slowly, is to have a pup tent in case the house burns. What do you mean? Suppose we fire up the JATOs and the structure cracks. Want to hang around in spaces until a ship happens by? That's silly. The stresses have been calculated. That's what the man said when the bridge fell. We'll do it my way. Dalrymple stormed off. Tiny's events to keep Gloria fenced up were sort of pitiful. In the first place, the radio tech's biggest job was repairing suit walkie-talkies, done on watch. A rash of such troubles broke out on her shift. I made some shift transfers and docked a few for costs, too. It's not proper maintenance when a man deliberately busts his aerial. There were other symptoms. Became stylish to shave. Men started wearing shirts around quarters, and bathing increased to where I thought I would have to rig another water still. Came the shift when D113 was ready and the JATOs readjusted. I don't mind saying I was nervous. All hands were ordered out of the quarters into suits. They perched around the girders and waited. Men in spacesuits all look alike. We used numbers and colored armbands. Supervisors had 2 antennas, one for the gang frequency, one for the supervisor's circuit. With Tiny and me, the second antenna hooked back through the radio shack into all the gang's frequencies. A broadcast. The supervisor reported their men cleared the fireworks, and I was about to give Tiny the word when this figure came climbing through the girds inside the danger zone. No safety line, no armband, one antenna. Miss Gloria, of course. Tiny hauled her out of the blast zone and anchored her with his own safety line. I heard his voice harsh on my helmet. Who do you think you are, a sidewalk superintendent? And her voice, what do you expect me to do? Go park on a star. I told you to stay away from the job. If you can't obey orders, I'll lock you up. I reached him, switched up our radio, and touched helmet. Boss, I said, you're broadcasting. Oh, he says, switches off and touches helmets with her. We can still hear her. She didn't switch off. Why, you big baboon? I came outside because you sent a search party to clear everybody out. And how would I know about a safety line rule? You kept me penned up. And finally, we'll see. I dragged him away, and he told the boss electrician to go ahead. Then we forgot the row, for we were looking at the prettiest fireworks ever seen. A giant St. Catherine's wheel, rockets blasting all over it. Utterly soundless out there in space, but beautiful beyond compare. The blast died away, and there was the living quarters, spinning true as a flywheel. Ty and I both let out sighs of relief. We all went back inside then to see what weight it tasted like. tasted funny. I went through the shaft and started down the ladders, feeling myself gain weight as I neared the rim. I felt seasick, like the first time I experienced no weight. I could hardly walk and my calves cramped. We inspected throughout, then went to the office and sat down. Felt good, just right for comfort. Once heard gravity at the rim. Tiny grabbed his terror arms and grinned. Beats being pinned up in D113. Speaking of being pinned up, Miss Gloria said, walking in, may I have a word with you, Mr. Larson? Huh? Certainly. Matter of fact, I wanted to see you. I owe you an apology, Miss McNally. I was... Forget it, she cut in. You were on edge. I want to know this. How long are you going to keep up this nonsense of trying to chaperone me? He studied her. Not long. Just till your relief arrives. So, who's the shop steward around here? A ship fitter named McAndrews. If you can't use him, you're a staff member. Not in the job I'm feeling. I'm going to talk to him. You're discriminating against me, and in my off time at that. Perhaps, but you will find I have the authority. Legally, I'm a ship's captain while on this job. Captain in space has wide discriminatory powers. Then you should use them with discrimination. He grinned. Isn't that what you just said I was doing? We didn't hear from the shop steward, but Miss Gloria started doing as she pleased. She showed us the movies next off shift with Dalrymple. Tiny left in the middle. She was coming back alone. He stopped her, having seen to it that I was present. Miss McNally, yes? I think you know. Well, Chief Inspector Dalrymple is a married man. You're suggesting that my conduct has been improper? No, but mind your own business. Before he can answer, she added, "Am I interested in you that he told me about your 4 children?" Tiny sputtered, Why, I'm not even married." So, that makes it worse, doesn't it? She swept out. Tiny quit trying to keep her in her room, but told her to notify him whenever she left it. I kept him busy writing herd on her, our friend suggesting I get Dalrymple to spell him. I was surprised when he told me to put through the order dismissing her. I'd been very sure he was going to drop it. What's the charge, I asked. Insubordination. I kept mum. He said, well, she won't take orders. She does her work okay. You give orders you wouldn't give to one of the men, and the man wouldn't take. You disagree with my orders? That's not the point. You can't prove the charge, Tiny. Well, charge her with being female. I can prove that. I didn't say anything. Dad, he added, wheedlingly, you know how to write it. No personal animus against Miss McNally, but I felt as a matter of policy and so on and so forth. I wrote it and gave it to Hammond privately. Radio texts are sworn to secrecy, but it didn't surprise me that I was stopped by O'Connor, one of our best metalsmith. Look, Dad, is it true the old man is getting rid of Brooksy? Brooksy? Brooksy McNally. She says to call her Brooks. Is it true? I admitted it, then went on, wondering if I should have lied. It takes 4 hours, about, for a ship to lift from Earth. The shift before the Pole Star was due, with Miss Gloria's relief. The timekeeper brought me 2 separation slips. The 2 men were nothing. We averaged more each ship. An hour later, he reached me by supervisor and asked me to come to the time office. I was out in the room inspecting a weld job. I said no. Please, Mr. Witherspoon, he begged. You've got to. When little boy doesn't call me Dad, it means something. I went. It was a cue-like mail call outside his door. I went in and he shut the door on them. He handed me a double handful of separation slips. What in the great depths of the night is this? I asked. There's a dozen more I ain't had time to write up yet. None of the slips had any reason given, just own choice. Look, Jimmy, what goes on here? Can't you dope it out, Dad? Shucks, I'm turning in one too. I told him my guess, and he admitted it. So I took the slips, called Tiny, and told him for the love of heaven to come to his office. Tiny chewed his lip considerable. But Dad, they can't strike. It's a non-strike contract with bonds from every union concerned. It's no strike, Tony. You can't keep a man from quitting. They'll pay their own fares back, so help me. Guess again. Most of them have worked long enough for the free ride. We'll have to hire others quick or we'll miss our date. Worse than that, Tiny, we won't finish. My next start parade, you won't even have a maintenance crew. I never had a gang of men quit me. I'll talk to them. No good, Tiny. You're up against something too strong for you. You're against me, Dad? I'm never against you, Tiny. He said, Dad, you think I'm pig-headed, but I'm right. You can't have one woman run 700 men. It drives them nutty. I didn't say it affected them the same way. I said, is that bad? Of course. I can't let the job be ruined to humor one woman. Tiny, have you looked at the progress charts lately? I've already had time to. What about them? I knew why I hadn't had time. You have trouble proving Miss Corey interfered with the job. We're ahead of schedule. We are? He was studying the charts. I put an arm around her shoulder. Look, son, I said. Sex has been around on our planet a long time. Earth's side, they'd never get away from it. Yet some pretty big jobs get built anyhow. Maybe we just have to learn to live with it here, too. Matter of fact, you had the answer a minute ago. I did? I sure didn't know it. You said, you can't have one woman among several hundred men. Get me? Huh? No, I don't. Wait a minute. Maybe I do. Ever tried jujitsu? Sometimes you win by relaxing. He buzzed the Radio Shack. Have him relieve you now. I come to my office. He did it handsomely, stood up and made a speech. He'd been wrong, taken a long time to see it. Hoped there were no hard feelings, etc. He was instructed in the home office to see how many jobs could be filled at once with a female help. Don't forget married couples. I put in mildly. And better ask for some older woman too. I'll do that, Tiny agreed. Have I missed anything? Guess not. We'll have to break quarters, but there's time. Okay, I'm telling them to hold the Polestar Goriev so they can send a few this trip. That's fine. He looked really happy. He chewed his lip. I feel like I missed something. I've got it. Tell them to send up a chaplain for the station as soon as possible. Under the new policy, we need one any time. I thought so too. The end.